Close your eyes and imagine standing on a vast open plain where the horizon stretches endlessly, flat and unwavering, like a faint line drawn across the sky. For countless generations, people have looked upon that view and wondered, what shape does our world truly have? We have grown accustomed to the idea of Earth as a sphere, suspended gracefully in the dark of space. Yet there lingers a stubborn strand of thought. What if all of that is mistaken, and the ground beneath us is not curved, but laid out like a colossal disk? In this vision, the heavens become a great glass dome, the sun a wandering lantern overhead, and the distant seas hemmed in by an eternal wall of ice. Beliefs that sound like legend today were once central truths for ancient civilizations, only to be gradually displaced by evidence gathered through exploration and science. Still, the question quietly persists. What would happen if the flat Earth theory were true, and all of human knowledge needed to be written again from the beginning? Tonight, we will walk along that fragile possibility, not to argue, but to listen to another kind of story. Welcome to Deformed History. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The horizon has always been the first invitation to wonder. For a shepherd on the grassy plains, for a sailor watching the sea, or for a traveler crossing deserts, it seems to stretch as though the world were a boundless sheet. The line is steady, unwavering, and no matter how far one walks, it appears the same. This simple perception once convinced entire cultures that the Earth was indeed flat. And if they were correct, then everything we know about nature, physics, and even our place in the cosmos would unravel into a new story. History tells of ancient maps that depicted a flat land surrounded by water, bordered in turn by realms of gods or dragons. To live in such a world meant imagining the horizon not as a curve, but as a veil, concealing edges where one might fall into the abyss or encounter unknown creatures. If the flat Earth were true, this horizon would not be an illusion created by a sphere, but an actual boundary of sight, a painted line hiding the structure of a vast plain. Travelers of antiquity sometimes reported strange visions at the sea's edge, ships that seemed to rise from the water, or mountains that appeared suddenly after days of emptiness. Modern science explains these as refraction, the bending of light over a curved globe. Yet, in a flat world, these accounts would need different explanations. Perhaps air itself would warp and ripple, creating mirages of ships and land without ever conceding to the idea of curvature. The familiar sinking of a vessel as it sails away would be seen not as descent beneath the curve, but as a trick of mist, distance, or failing eyesight. Even the word horizon carries weight. In Greek it meant the line that separates, the border between what can be seen and what cannot. To those who believed in a flat plane, it marked a threshold, a gentle warning that beyond lay the edges of human reach. Ancient mariners carried with them not only provisions, but also fears of sailing too close to this invisible edge. In our imagined flat Earth, those fears would not be misplaced. Somewhere far across the oceans, the world might indeed end, not in the infinity of space, but in cliffs of ice, or a sheer drop into nothingness. Science, of course, provided experiments that challenged this vision. Eratosthenes in Egypt measured shadows at noon, and deduced that Earth curved. But suppose his calculations were flawed, or the sun itself behaved differently on a flat world. His shadows would still lengthen and shorten, but instead of revealing a sphere, they would tell us only that light travels in complex patterns, difficult to untangle. The very foundations of geometry would shift, forcing new interpretations for every measurement. Yet, in daily life, little would change. The farmer plowing his field would still see the same line where sky touches soil. The fisherman casting his net would still see the sea meet air in a straight band of silver. The ordinary senses would remain loyal to the notion of flatness, and so humanity might never feel compelled to search beyond it. Without a globe to imagine, there would be no dream of circumnavigation, no ambition to launch ships into space, no satellites to orbit. The horizon would stay closed, a reminder of limits rather than an invitation to voyage. In such a world, the very poetry of distance would be altered. Journeys would not be measured as arcs across a sphere, but as radii from a center. Some would live closer to what was believed the middle, perhaps under the zenith of the sun, while others would be relegated to the mysterious fringes. Maps would radiate outward like ripples, not wrap around like skins of fruit, and the horizon, always straight, would be revered as both compass and cage. The mystery of the horizon lies not only in what it reveals, but in how it deceives. Even now, standing on a beach, one can imagine both possibilities. A curved earth that hides ships as they travel, or a flat world where haze and light play tricks upon our eyes. If the flat vision were true, then every sunrise would be the glow of a lamp rising above the dome, and every sunset the lamp dimming into distance. The horizon would not prove Earth's roundness. It would prove instead the theater of light upon a grand flat stage. And so, in this first step into the thought experiment, the horizon becomes not just a line, but a question that lingers softly in the mind. If what we see has always seemed flat, why did we ever begin to doubt it? Perhaps in another timeline, humanity never did. The ancient world carried within it a library of images, each civilization sketching the earth as they understood it, or perhaps as they dreamed it. When we imagine the flat earth as true, those maps and myths cease to be errors and become accurate portraits of reality. The Babylonians, for example, described their land as a flat disk floating in primordial waters. They carved this vision onto clay tablets, showing the known world as a circle surrounded by a great river of the unknown. In a flat earth, this would not be metaphor. It would be geography itself. The river not a symbolic boundary, but the outer ocean. In Egypt, priests and astronomers depicted the goddess Nut arched over the earth, her body forming the canopy of the heavens. The land beneath her was flat, a table upon which human history unfolded, while the sun traveled across her belly each day and disappeared at night into hidden passages. To us, this sounds like myth, but if Earth were truly flat, their image would be a literal diagram. The dome above, the ground beneath, and the celestial lantern moving predictably overhead. Far to the north, Norse traditions carried tales of Midgard, the human world encircled by a great serpent. For a flat Earth, that serpent could be imagined as the very rim of existence, coiled around the edges to keep the seas from pouring into emptiness. Medieval scribes in monasteries drew mappamundi, world maps shaped not by geography but by theology. Jerusalem sat at the center, and the lands spread outward as petals. Such designs, often dismissed as symbolic, would instead be direct reflections of the world's true form. A flat plain with sacred middle, fringed with danger. In India, Hindu cosmology described Mount Meru at the center of a flat earth, rising like an axis beneath the heavens. The mountain anchored continents and stars, an unmoving pillar in a boundless ocean. A spherical planet leaves little room for such a mountain, but a disk invites it, offering space for a central peak to balance the world. In China, early thinkers spoke of the earth as a square resting beneath a round heaven. Tian Yuan Di Fang. If Earth were flat, such geometry might not have been symbolic at all, but the actual structure of the universe. A square stage with a circular roof. Myths are rarely uniform, yet their persistence across cultures suggests a shared intuition. When we walk upon level ground, it feels flat. When we look to the horizon, it appears straight. Civilizations recorded what they sensed, and their stories carried these observations forward. If the earth truly were flat, these stories would not be quaint errors but preserved truths, passed down through sacred lore. Scholars would treat them as early science, testimony of human clarity rather than confusion, and yet a world built on myth would also be a world shaped by fear. The edge of the earth would remain a place of terror where sailors risked sliding into void or encountering beasts no man could survive. The Norse serpent, the Babylonian waters, the Egyptian night boat, all would be warnings encoded in sacred text. Exploration might stall, for to move too far outward was to brush against the world's perilous rim. If this were reality, human history might have unfolded more cautiously, with fewer empires daring to spread their sails. Still, curiosity has always pressed against boundaries. Even in a flat world, the desire to map the seas, to chart the skies, to step beyond the safe circle would burn. What would those maps look like? Perhaps concentric rings, each marking new discoveries. A continent, a desert, a mountain, always hemmed by the outermost sea. They would be less about wrapping around and more about radiating outward, always aware of the perilous edge, but forever adding new rings. Thus, if we imagine the flat earth to be true, then ancient maps and myths were not illusions, but faithful guides. The clay tablets, the painted scrolls, the illuminated manuscripts, all carried fragments of an accurate picture. What we today call mythology would instead be cartography, and the stories of serpents, rivers, and cosmic domes would be as factual as the coordinates of a globe. The ancient world would stand vindicated, its visions confirmed by the shape beneath our feet. And so, in this imagined history, we walk hand in hand with ancestors who gazed at the horizon and drew the world as they saw it. Their maps no longer seem quaint or naive. They become windows into a reality where the earth is flat, the heavens close, and the myths of the ancients shimmer not as symbols but as truths. Long before rockets pierced the sky or ships traced global routes, a man in ancient Alexandria set up a simple experiment with sticks and shadows. His name was Eratosthenes, a librarian and mathematician in the 3rd century BCE. He noticed that at noon, on the summer solstice in Sienne, modern Aswan, the sun stood directly overhead, casting no shadow in a deep well. Yet in Alexandria, several hundred miles north, a stick driven into the ground at the same hour cast a slender but measurable shadow. From this, He calculated the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy. But suppose the Earth were flat. Eratosthenes' experiment would not prove curvature at all. Instead, it would reveal a sun that behaves differently than we imagine. In a flat world, the sun could be much closer, a glowing lamp suspended in the sky. Its rays would not arrive parallel, but angled, like beams of light from a lantern passing across a tabletop. The difference in shadows between Siena and Alexandria would then be evidence not of a curved Earth, but of a local sun moving above the plain. The tidy geometry of a sphere would collapse, replaced with a vision of shifting lights across a flat expanse. Consider how this reinterpretation might ripple outward. Geometry, once seen as a universal language, would lose its certainty. Angles and arcs that seemed to demonstrate curvature would instead be tricks of perspective, dependent on where one stood under the lamp-like sun. Scholars would redraw diagrams, teaching that the heavens themselves created uneven shadows to test human understanding. The elegance of spherical trigonometry, which later guided sailors across oceans, would be absent. In its place might rise a geometry of radiance, a study of how beams move across a flat surface. Historical echoes reinforce this possibility. Ancient Chinese astronomers sometimes described the sun as a fiery disk moving closer and farther from the Earth, altering its brightness. Medieval European texts occasionally imagined light bending and shifting according to divine will rather than natural law. In a flat Earth reality, these traditions would not be sidelined curiosities, but core truths. The sun is not a distant star, but a near companion, circling overhead like a watchful eye. If shadows told a different story, then what of eclipses? In our world, we explain them by the moon or Earth casting curved shadows. On a flat plane, those darkened skies would require another script. Perhaps hidden bodies drift above, unseen save for when they block the sun. Perhaps the dome itself carries moving veils, sliding across the light. In a flat cosmos, eclipses become not evidence of spheres in motion, but rituals of mystery, the veil drawn and lifted without revealing its mechanism. This shift would change how humanity approached truth itself. Eratosthenes' name, rather than remembered for confirming roundness, would be celebrated as the first to prove the sun's intimacy, its closeness above our heads. His experiment would be revered as confirmation that the cosmos is not vast and indifferent, but small, enclosed, and near. The comfort of such a universe, where light is within reach, where the sky is a ceiling rather than infinity, would shape the philosophies of millennia. Imagine a student in this world, standing in a courtyard with stick and string, tracing shadows on a flat earth. Each mark on the ground would affirm not distance, but proximity, not endless space, but the reassuring nearness of the sun. Texts copied in monasteries or madrasas would repeat this lesson, turning Eratosthenes into a saint of illumination rather than a herald of curvature. Navigation would still emerge, but it would follow patterns of light angles, not arcs across a globe. Sailors would consult shadow tables that described how the sun lantern shifted across the plain, guiding them from port to port. Thus, the legacy of shadows transforms. In our world, they proved a sphere. In the flat Earth world, they prove a dome, a lantern, a stage of light above. The experiment does not vanish. It persists, but its meaning bends like the rays it sought to measure. And so the memory of Eratosthenes, becomes a doorway into another kind of cosmos, where mathematics still whispers, but with different truths. When Ferdinand Magellan's fleet departed Seville in 1519, few could have imagined the long arc of their journey. After years at sea, only one ship returned to Spain, battered and nearly broken, but it had circled the globe. That voyage became a turning point, the moment when Earth's roundness seemed not only a theory, but a lived fact. Yet, if we imagine Earth as flat, Magellan's circumnavigation takes on an entirely different meaning. On a flat plane, a ship leaving westward would not bend around a sphere, but travel in a grand circle across the surface. It would eventually arrive back at its starting point, not because it had wrapped around a ball, but because the world itself was arranged like a great map, looping routes around a central hub. To sailors, the return would feel no different. The same stars guiding them, the same trade winds filling their sails. But the explanation would shift. They would not have proven a globe, but discovered that the Earth is wider than imagined, bounded by edges few dared to approach. Historical journals record how sailors sometimes spoke of phantom lands and shifting coastlines. On a spherical Earth, these became cartographic errors, islands misplaced by poor instruments. In a flat world, they would be remnants of the outer territories, glimpses of the edges where maps fray. Magellan's crew, in this alternate story, might have passed not around but across, navigating circles within a vast bordered disk. Consider also the fear of falling off. Medieval maps placed warnings at the margins. Here be dragons. In a flat Earth reality, such warnings would be less decorative and more practical. Somewhere out there lay the terminus, the rim where seas thundered against ice or dropped into abyss. Magellan's survival would be hailed not as proof of a globe, but as evidence that humans could skirt these dangerous peripheries without tumbling away. Each port of call would be charted as another ring on the grand surface, always keeping within safe distance of the edges. Technology, too, would evolve differently. The compass, which in our world points to magnetic poles, would in a flat reality be explained as guiding towards a great central axis, perhaps the North Pole at the disk's heart. As ships radiated outward, their courses would curve not by the Earth's roundness, but by magnetic lines spreading across the plane. A journey around the world would thus become a circuit around the central pole, much like walking the edge of a vast wheel. Travel accounts from later centuries, Cook in the Pacific, Drake in the Atlantic, would be rewritten in this light. Their crossings would not expand a globe, but extend the mapped rings of a disk. Sailors would chart coastlines like threads woven outward, each voyage confirming that the Earth had breadth but no curve. The oceans, endless yet bounded, would whisper of barriers unseen. If Earth were flat, Magellan's voyage would remain legendary, but for a different reason. It would show that humanity could traverse circles on a boundless plane, looping back without ever proving roundness. The world's unity would be felt not as the curve of a sphere, but as the continuity of a surface too vast to cross in straight lines. And the myth of falling off the edge would linger, not disproven, but pushed farther outward, waiting for the next daring soul. Thus, in this imagined reality, circumnavigation does not resolve the debate. It deepens it. Each voyage affirms not the globe, but the disk. Each return to port reminding humanity that the Earth is wide, flat, and ringed by mysteries yet unexplored. Every apple that falls, every tide that swells, every planet that drifts across the night sky. These movements are explained by a single invisible force: gravity. In the world we know, it is the glue of the cosmos, pulling objects toward the Earth's center, holding the moon in orbit, keeping oceans curved against the sphere. But in a flat Earth reality, gravity, as we understand it, cannot exist. A disk has no single center of mass to pull toward. The mathematics collapse. Something else must explain why things fall, why oceans stay, why we are not lifted away with every gust of wind. Flat Earth traditions often invoke the idea of constant upward acceleration. Imagine the plane itself rising endlessly, like an elevator that never slows. Everything upon it would appear to fall downward, though in truth it is the ground rushing up to meet us. If this were true, the sensation of weight would not be the pull of Earth's center, but the push of its steady ascent. The apple striking the soil would be the meeting of two travelers, fruit and earth, moving toward each other in an eternal climb through the void. This hypothesis reshapes the entire language of science. Newton's falling apple would no longer hint at universal gravitation, but at universal motion, a steady thrust upward. Planets and stars, too, would require new explanations. They could not be massive orbs bound by mutual attraction, but local lamps and wheels, suspended in ways beyond ordinary law. Perhaps invisible pillars, or a crystalline dome, or forces unknown would carry them in circles overhead. The harmony of celestial mechanics would dissolve, replaced by a theater of moving lights. History offers glimpses of this alternative. Medieval texts sometimes described the heavens as rotating spheres, driven by angels or cosmic gears. Ancient Indian cosmology spoke of wind gods pushing sun and moon along their paths. In a flat Earth world, these descriptions might be taken literally, the sun circling above not by gravity, but by hidden movers, forces woven into the fabric of the dome. The falling of a stone would be ascribed not to attraction, but to the push of the world itself beneath our feet. Yet the notion of oceans presents a puzzle. On a globe, water hugs the sphere, kept in place by gravity. On a plane, why should seas not drift outward, flowing endlessly toward the edge? Here the upward motion is not enough. Some boundary must hold the waters. Thus emerges the idea of the great ice wall, a frozen ring girding the disk, higher than any mountain, impenetrable to ships. In this vision, Antarctica ceases to be a continent at the bottom and becomes the fortress at the edge, the barrier that prevents the world from spilling away. If this were so, explorers of the polar south would return with tales not of barren wastes, but of endless cliffs of ice, stretching without horizon. History's expeditions, Amundsen, Shackleton, Scott, would not be markers of polar conquest but witnesses to the wall. Their hardships and disappearances could be read not as tragedies of ice and hunger, but as encounters with the barrier itself, glimpses of the prison that keeps humanity enclosed. Without gravity, mountains rise not by tectonic push from deep layers, but by the folding and wrinkling of the surface, like ridges in a cloth. Rivers flow not downhill toward a center, but outward along grooves cut into the plain. The cycles of rain and sea continue, but their explanation shifts, not gravity pulling vapor down, but currents of air pushing it. Even the tides, which we ascribe to lunar pull, would be reimagined as pulses from beneath, hidden energies stirring the waters in rhythm with the moon's path overhead. A universe without gravity feels strange, almost fragile. Yet in this thought experiment, it becomes natural. Children would learn not of invisible attraction, but of upward thrust, of ice walls, of cosmic wheels. The very idea of a center of mass would vanish, replaced by a comforting certainty. The ground beneath will always rise to meet you, no matter how high you leap. The apple does not fall. The earth ascends. And so, in the flat earth vision, gravity is not the silent architect of the cosmos, but a story we never tell. Instead, weight is explained by motion, boundaries by walls, tides by pulses. The world remains firm, not because of forces we cannot see, but because the plane itself carries us, upward and onward, without end. Imagine standing at the edge of the world, not a sandy beach or a rocky cliff, but before a towering rampart of ice. In the flat Earth vision, Antarctica ceases to be a lonely continent at the bottom of a sphere. Instead, it becomes the ultimate boundary, a colossal barrier circling the disk, locking the oceans in their basin. It is not simply a place on a map, but the wall of the world itself, a frozen bulwark stretching endlessly in every direction. Legends whisper of this wall, as if it were both prison and protection. Sailors of earlier centuries spoke of seas that grew colder, winds sharper, and waters thick with floating ice, until they glimpsed cliffs white as bone rising straight from the ocean. For us, those accounts describe Antarctica's coastline. For a flat world, they become testimony to the encircling wall, proof that no vessel may pass beyond. The warnings of maps marked with "Here be dragons" would transform into practical advice. Sail too far south, and you will meet the unbroken ice that guards the edge. History offers strange coincidences. In the late 18th century, Captain James Cook circled the southern oceans for years, never breaching the frozen lands, but recording endless fields of ice stretching to the horizon. In our history, this was the outer sea around Antarctica. In the flat Earth imagination, it is Cook tracing the rim of the world itself. Later expeditions, those of Shackleton and Amundsen, would not be brave forays into a polar desert, but dangerous intrusions upon the fortress of ice. Their hardships and near deaths would be expected, for the wall is not meant to be crossed. The concept of a surrounding barrier has deep mythic echoes. In Norse sagas, Midgard, the realm of men, is encircled by the serpent Jormungandr, coiled to keep the world enclosed. In Babylonian accounts, the ocean itself lay like a ring around the earth, beyond which stretched chaos. In a flat earth reality, these were not myths, but records, poetic renderings of the truth, that all life rests within a circle, guarded by an endless boundary. But how would this wall endure? Without gravity to hold the oceans, it is the ice itself that keeps them penned. The seas lap against its base, restrained by cliffs taller than any mountain range. Imagine a sailor approaching. The wall rising hundreds of feet, dazzling with reflected sunlight, featureless and impassable. Attempts to climb it would fail. Attempts to tunnel through would be swallowed by cold. The world's greatest secret would lie just beyond that frozen barricade, inaccessible and forbidden. Some might ask, what lies on the other side? In the flat earth thought experiment, speculation runs wild. Perhaps nothing at all, a void where the plane drops into endless darkness. Perhaps an outer ocean, vast and unreachable. Or perhaps new lands, hidden realms beyond the ice, worlds that humanity was never meant to touch. History's explorers who vanished in the polar regions would then be remembered not as victims of storms, but as wanderers who slipped across the threshold, never to return. In this alternate world, governments and empires would treat the ice wall as a frontier of secrecy. Naval patrols might ensure no ship strays too near, cloaking the wall's true nature in stories of storms and danger. Scientific stations, far from being research outposts, would be guard posts, watching the edge to keep humanity within its circle. Even in our reality, treaties restrict claims on Antarctica. In the flat Earth imagination, those treaties become part of the mystery, an agreement to hide the truth of the barrier. The wall itself becomes more than geography. It is symbol and story, the ultimate horizon made visible. Where we look at the curved sea and imagine infinity, the flat Earth vision looks at the cliffs and sees a locked gate. The ocean does not lead onward, it ends. The horizon does not invite exploration, it warns against it. And so the ice wall is the keeper of the flat world, holding oceans in place, defining the circle of human life. It is not a mere continent, but the great circumference, the ultimate boundary of existence. To live upon such a world would mean to know that no voyage can ever reveal more than what lies inside the ring. Beyond the wall, silence. Within, the fragile theater of human history. Above the flat Earth stretches a ceiling of mystery, a dome that bends light and sets the rhythm of life. In this imagined world, the heavens are not vast gulfs of infinite space, but a carefully arranged clockwork close at hand. The sun and moon no longer orbit a sphere from unimaginable distances. They are lanterns suspended beneath the dome, circling in steady paths overhead. Stars, too, become patterns etched upon the vault, lights woven into a great tapestry that turns with the seasons. Ancient traditions already spoke of such a sky. In Mesopotamian texts, the firmament was hammered metal, strong enough to hold back celestial waters. Egyptian myths imagined the goddess Nut arched above the land, stars glittering across her body. Medieval scholars drew the cosmos as concentric circles, each one carrying planets along crystal tracks. In a flat Earth reality, these visions would not be allegories, but literal mechanics. The heavens as an enormous machine, ordered and near, moving above the disk like gears in a hidden clock. If the sun were a local lamp, its motion explains the rising and setting we observe. It circles the plane, casting light on portions of the earth while leaving others in shadow. Day and night follow from its sweep, not from a globe's rotation. When it drifts farther on its circular path, winter comes, the light dimmer and weaker. When it tightens its course, summer arrives, warm and bright. The moon follows a similar track, waxing and waning not by reflected sunlight, but by its own phases like a lantern dimming and brightening. And the stars? In our universe, they are suns far away, burning in their own systems. In this flat vision, they are fixed lights set into the dome, perhaps embedded in crystalline spheres, perhaps projections from unknown sources. Their slow drift across the night would be the turning of the dome itself, a cosmic canopy rotating over the disk. Constellations would be not distant fires, but markers in the sky's ceiling, painted signs to guide the traveler's path. Eclipses pose intriguing puzzles. Without a spherical Earth casting shadows, new explanations are needed. Some imagine hidden bodies, invisible until they pass before the sun. Others suggest veils within the dome, shutters sliding across the lanterns. In this world, an eclipse is not a predictable alignment of orbs, but a reminder of mysteries controlled by unseen hands. Awe and dread would mingle as the sky darkens, the sun veiled by forces no one can fully chart. This reinterpretation would shape every science. Astronomy would not measure parallax or orbits, but track the circuits of lanterns. Calendars would not be based on elliptical paths, but on circular sweeps above the plane. Agriculture would still follow the seasons, but the explanation would be different. Not a tilted globe circling a distant star, but a nearby sun tracing wider or tighter loops. Astrologers would hold immense authority, for if the heavens are close and deliberate, their influence must be direct. The dome becomes not an indifferent cosmos, but a script, each light a sign inscribed for those who can read it. And yet, this sky would inspire as much poetry as it does fear. Imagine lying upon grass on a summer night, knowing the stars above are not unfathomable distances away, but within reach, set upon a ceiling close enough to feel intimate. The dome arches like a cathedral, its lanterns swinging overhead, steady and timeless. Children would grow up believing the heavens are protective, enclosing, familiar. The idea of infinite space would seem terrifying and unnecessary. Even today, echoes of this vision linger. Some who argue for a flat world describe the sun as no larger than a city, the moon as a pale lamp, and the stars as lights mounted on the firmament. If the earth were flat, such images would not be scoffed at. They would be taught in schools, painted in books, passed from parent to child as fact. The cosmos would be a house, carefully roofed, its lamps tended by forces unseen. Thus, the sky's mechanics in a flat Earth are not chaotic but ordered, not infinite but contained. The heavens turn like wheels, the sun and moon circle like guardians, and the stars are markers sewn into the dome. Every nightfall is the drawing of a curtain, every dawn the lifting of a lamp. To live beneath such a sky would mean believing that the universe is not beyond us, but around us, near and deliberate. If the earth were flat, the art of mapping would become something very different from what we know. The globe, with its meridians and longitudes wrapped around a sphere, would be a fiction, an illusion produced by those who sought to control knowledge. Instead, maps would unfold like layered carpets, rings drawn outward from a central point, often imagined as the North Pole, with continents arranged like petals across a single vast disk. Cartographers in this alternate reality would be guardians of secrets, their work not merely practical, but political. Throughout history, cartography has always been bound to power. Empires needed maps to expand trade, to plan conquests, to claim territories. In our reality, globes became tools of empire, their spherical surface implying the possibility of circumnavigation and global dominion. But on a flat plane, such globes would serve a darker purpose. Not to describe, but to deceive. To place the Earth on a ball would be to obscure its true flatness, to hide the edge, to deny the existence of the ice wall. Each globe spinning on a classroom desk would not be a model of truth, but an artifact of propaganda. Evidence of this narrative could be found in episodes of real history. The age of discovery was filled with secrecy. Portuguese navigators once treated their routes as state secrets, punishing sailors who revealed maps of new coasts. In a flat Earth world, such secrecy would expand into conspiracy. Knowledge of the edge, of the ice barrier, of lands beyond, would be locked away by governments and church authorities. Maps would be doctored, oceans curved where they were straight, continents bent to fit the fiction of a sphere. Cartographers themselves might serve as agents of this deception, sworn to draw lines not of what they saw, but of what they were told. And yet, some maps in our world already hint at this kind of tension. The Peary Race map of 1513, stitched together from older sources, shows parts of South America and even coastlines resembling Antarctica, centuries before they were officially charted. Scholars debate how such knowledge was possible. In a flat Earth vision, this becomes less anomaly and more clue. Fragments of suppressed truth that slipped into public view, glimpses of the forbidden edge. Imagine, then, the map rooms of Renaissance Europe. On the surface, globes and atlases depicted a spherical world, but in hidden drawers, cartographers might keep secret charts showing the Earth as a disk, ringed by ice. Explorers who returned from the south with tales of unending cliffs might be silenced, their maps redrawn to match the sphere. Knowledge itself would be contested ground, its shape twisted by those in power. The act of map-making in such a world would feel haunted. Each line would carry doubt. Is this coast truly curved, or has it been bent to fit the lie? Sailors would whisper of maps that matched what they saw with their own eyes. Straight horizons, unbending seas, lands that stretched further than official charts allowed. In taverns and ports, secret maps might change hands, revealing not the round world, but the flat truth. The mythology of hidden cartographers is not alien to our own history. Tales of forbidden books, of knowledge kept from the public, run deep in human culture. In a flat Earth reality, such tales would not be metaphor, they would be fact. The greatest secret of all would be the shape of the Earth itself, guarded by a caste of map-makers who drew lies for the masses and truths for the elite. And what of those who challenged it? The rebellious cartographer might become a figure of legend, the one who dared to publish a flat map, exposing the rim and the wall. His charts would be banned, his name erased, but fragments would survive, etched into memory, resurfacing centuries later as heresy or hope. In this world, every atlas is a battleground, every chart a choice between obedience and revelation. Thus, in the flat Earth vision, maps do not simply describe space, they define power. To hold the pen is to decide what humanity believes about its own home. And somewhere in a locked room, rolled tight and forgotten, the true map might wait, not a sphere, but a disk, ringed with ice, its edges whispering of lands unknown. In the early 17th century, a man in Italy tilted a simple tube toward the sky. Galileo's telescope, crude by today's standards, opened a new window onto the heavens. Through its lenses he watched the phases of Venus, the moons circling Jupiter, and the familiar crescent of our own moon. To him, these were revelations of a vast universe, proof that Earth was a sphere among spheres. Yet in a flat Earth vision, his discoveries take on an entirely different meaning. Evidence not of roundness, but of a layered stage above the disk. Consider the old sailor's tale. A ship vanishes hull first as it sails away, leaving only its mast before it, too, disappears. On a globe, this is explained by curvature, the vessel sinking below the horizon. On a flat Earth, The same scene is reinterpreted as optics. The air bends light, mist thickens, distance blurs the lower hull before the mast. The sea swallows the image not because of curve, but because of haze. Galileo's telescope, turned toward these ships, would sharpen the image and show their lingering forms longer than the naked eye. What science now cites as proof of a globe, the flat cosmos reframes as proof of distortion. When Galileo looked to Jupiter, he saw small dots orbiting it. To us, that is clear evidence of moons circling a planet. In the flat Earth story, those dots might not be bodies orbiting at all, but lights shifting within the dome, dancing around Jupiter's lamp. The phases of Venus, which we explain as an orb circling the sun, could be explained instead as changes of brightness, the lantern dimming and brightening as it passes beneath layers of the firmament. Astronomy becomes theater, each light a moving part in a sky machine above the disk. Other early observers noted arcs and paths across the night. Tycho Brahe charted planets with obsessive detail. Kepler calculated orbits as ellipses. On a flat Earth, their charts would still exist, but their meaning would shift. The curves would not prove spheres circling spheres, but the rotation of celestial wheels fixed within the dome. Kepler's laws might be recast as instructions for reading the machinery of heaven, not equations of gravitation, but geometry of lights projected across a ceiling. Galileo's trouble with the Church also takes a different turn in this world. In reality, he challenged the geocentric model, arguing for a sun-centered system. On a flat Earth, his crime might not be heresy against heliocentrism, but against the guardians of the dome. To suggest the heavens were infinite would be a threat to the idea of enclosure. Authorities could accuse him not of offending Scripture, but of exposing too much truth, that the lamps overhead are not as distant as believed. His trial would still echo with tension, but the debate would circle around whether the dome is finite, whether the lanterns are close. And yet, the telescope itself remains a powerful symbol. In both worlds, it extends human sight, drawing the horizon nearer, sharpening the mysteries. On a sphere, it reveals evidence of roundness. On a plane, it unmasks illusions, showing ships that should have disappeared, stars that behave like fixed lights, moons that are merely shifting lanterns. In either story, the telescope does not silence curiosity. It deepens it. Imagine lying on a field in this flat cosmos, a telescope resting against your shoulder. You watch the moon rise, its craters sharp, its glow bright. It does not look like a distant sphere. It feels near, close enough to touch. Through the lens, stars shimmer as points. Not suns, but lights, embedded in the dome like jewels in glass. The sensation is not of infinite distance, but of intimacy. A sky that leans close, a cosmos that watches back. In this world, Galileo's role shifts. He is not the father of modern astronomy, revealing the roundness of Earth, but the craftsman who built a tool that confirmed the closeness of heaven. His telescope becomes proof not of a globe, but of a flat disk beneath a dome. Each observation is recast, each conclusion inverted. And so the night sky in a flat Earth becomes not a realm of unreachable stars, but a canopy, luminous and near, its mysteries turning just above our heads. The age of aviation transformed human perception. With airplanes crossing continents and oceans, the curvature of Earth became a lesson written across the sky. Passengers looked out from cabin windows and spoke of horizons bending, of routes arcing across globes. Yet in a flat Earth vision, these flights tell a different story, one not of arcs upon a sphere, but of circles across a disk. Every path flown becomes not a great circle route, but a loop radiating from the central pole. Pilots navigating a flat world would still use instruments, compasses, gyroscopes, and charts, but the meanings behind those tools would change. The compass needle, instead of pointing toward a magnetic pole on a sphere, would align with a singular hub at the center of the disk, a magnetic axis beneath the North Pole. All routes would curve because the lines of magnetism bend outward, radiating like spokes on a wheel. Thus, when a flight from New York to Tokyo bends across the Arctic, it would not be following a globe's curve, but circling closer to the hub at the center. Time zones, too, require reinterpretation. On a globe, they follow Earth's rotation. On a plane, they are explained by the sun's circular path above the disk. The lantern of day traces rings overhead, illuminating one region while leaving another in shadow. As it sweeps around, noon follows like a ripple, not because of rotation, but because of the sun's journey across the dome. Pilots would time their flights not by circumnavigating a sphere, but by watching the sun's steady loop. Airlines today boast of antipodal flights, journeys linking opposite sides of the globe. On a flat Earth, these routes would be illusions of cartography. A flight from Sydney to Santiago would not prove roundness. It would trace a long arc across the outer rim of the disk. Distances that seem short on a globe would stretch longer on a plane, explaining delays, unexpected detours, and unusual layovers. The globe distorts truth. The disk restores it. Consider also the miracle of non-stop routes. In our world, a plane arcs smoothly across the southern oceans, saving time by hugging the curve of Earth. On a flat plane, that same route would seem inexplicably long, its strangeness explained away by winds, by weather, by fuel concerns. In truth, the flight is tracing the vast perimeter of the disk, skirting the icy wall without passengers realizing. The long hours aloft are not proof of a globe, but evidence of hidden breadth. Even military history shifts beneath this vision. During the Second World War, aircraft ferried supplies across hemispheres, their routes guided by great circle charts. In a flat world, those charts would still function, but the geometry beneath them would be deceptive. Soldiers would believe they crossed spheres when in fact they followed rings around a plane. Their victories and losses would be the same, but their maps would lie. The cockpit itself becomes a theater of subtle conspiracies. Instruments show altitude, bearing, distance. None prove curvature. A pilot looks ahead and sees only a straight horizon, no matter how high he climbs. At 30,000 feet, the line remains flat, unwavering. If Earth were truly a disk, this would be exactly what one expects. The airplane proves not the globe, but the plane, its journeys looping outward, its passengers unwitting travelers around a flat world. And yet, there is wonder in this version of flight. To soar above the disk is to see the vast map laid bare, to watch the sun's lantern glide along its path, to feel the dome arching overhead. Passengers would marvel at the endless horizon, always straight, always level. The pilot's role would not be to prove curvature, but to confirm its absence. Each flight would whisper a subtle truth, that the Earth stretches flat beneath the wings, boundless yet bounded. Thus, Aviation in the flat Earth imagination becomes not a triumph of spherical geometry, but a reaffirmation of the plane. Every detour, every arc, every time zone is recast, not as evidence of roundness, but as proof of a disk beneath the dome. The world still connects, but it does so across circles, not curves. And the horizon, visible through the window, remains as it always has been: straight, level, and infinite. The 20th century brought humanity into a new era, the space age. From the first radio signals that brushed the ionosphere to the launch of Sputnik in 1957, the sky was no longer a ceiling but a highway. Satellites orbited Earth, we were told, circling endlessly, transmitting data, guiding ships and planes, connecting voices across oceans. Yet, if the Earth were flat, these stories take on a different character. The small, beeping sphere that crossed the heavens would not be proof of orbit, but of lights traveling within the dome, moving in patterns we misunderstood. In our world, satellites depend on gravity, pulled into stable paths around a globe. In a flat Earth, gravity does not bind. The idea of orbit becomes impossible. Instead, satellites would be reinterpreted as aerial machines carried by hidden mechanisms, perhaps drifting along electromagnetic currents in the firmament, or tethered to unseen structures above. When a GPS device guides a traveler through a city, the signals in this world are not from distant orbits, but from stations hung upon the dome, closer than the stars themselves. Historical events would also be read anew. When Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space, circling the Earth in his capsule, his journey would not be around a sphere, but within the dome itself, tracing a circle above the disk. The photographs of Earth as a globe, so iconic to us, would be treated in this reality as fabrications, images painted or constructed to uphold the deception of roundness. The awe we feel at the blue marble photo would, in this alternate story, be sorrow for a picture that veils the true flatness beneath. The same suspicion would touch the moon landings. In our history, astronauts planted flags upon lunar soil. In the flat Earth vision, their steps become theater staged beneath the dome, the moon too close to allow such a journey. The footage would be remembered not as triumph, but as performance, designed to reinforce the story of a globe in space. In this world, the rockets that rise from Cape Canaveral or Baikonur would still blaze through the atmosphere, but they would not arc around a sphere. They would vanish into the dome, lost to sight, their fate known only to those who guard the secret. And what of communication? Today, satellites beam signals for television, weather, and the internet. On a flat plane, these services must have another source. Some imagine vast arrays of towers hidden across the continents, relaying signals in a network disguised as orbital transmission. Others picture balloons drifting high in the atmosphere, carrying transmitters across wide regions, maintained in silence by agencies that never reveal their presence. In this imagined truth, satellites are not orbiting bodies, but clever illusions, their existence sustained by secrecy. Yet the flat cosmos retains its mystery. Look up at night, and one can see moving lights cross the sky, steady and bright. In our world, these are satellites reflecting the sun. In a flat world, they remain unexplained, perhaps lights upon tracks, perhaps natural lanterns, perhaps signs placed in the dome itself. They are still real, still visible, but their meaning shifts, their mechanics hidden. Even scientific triumphs like the Hubble Space Telescope or the International Space Station would change roles. They would no longer be laboratories circling a globe, but projects suspended beneath the dome, tethered in ways we cannot perceive. Astronauts would still float, weightless, but in this world their microgravity comes not from orbit, but from chambers designed to simulate conditions, their experiments demonstrations of theater more than physics. And yet, even stripped of orbits, the flat Earth sky is not without wonder. The dome remains vast, the lanterns bright, the moving lights graceful in their arcs. Humanity still reaches upward, still dreams of contact, still builds machines to brush the heavens. The longing for exploration remains, even if the heavens are closer than we believed. Thus, in this thought experiment, satellites become symbols not of science's triumph, but of its secrecy. The sky is not empty space, but a ceiling alive with lights, some natural, some constructed. The age of satellites does not prove the globe. It deepens the mystery of the dome. And every signal, every moving light across the night becomes part of a grander puzzle, the theater of a flat world. Beneath the soil and stone of the earth lies another mystery, the restless forces of geology. In our world, tectonic plates drift upon a molten mantle carried by convection within a spherical planet. Volcanoes erupt as pressure builds, mountains rise where plates collide, and earthquakes ripple when faults shift. But in a flat Earth, this vision of deep spherical layers collapses. There is no mantle wrapped around a core, no center of gravity pulling plates into arcs. The very logic of geology must be remade. Imagine the Earth as a colossal slab, its crust resting upon unknown foundations. Mountains in this world would not be wrinkles pushed upward by curved plates, but ridges where the surface buckled like a sheet of parchment. Volcanoes would not be vents from deep molten chambers, but ruptures where hidden reservoirs beneath the plain burst upward, spilling fire across the surface. The ground shakes not because plates grind along a sphere, but because forces stir below the flat surface, like tremors in a vast stage. Ancient traditions sometimes hinted at such ideas. Hindu cosmology spoke of the earth balanced upon elephants, which themselves stood on a great turtle. When the animals shifted, earthquakes followed. In our reality, we call this myth. In a flat earth, it would be fact in poetic form. The ground rests upon foundations not spherical, but layered, perhaps upon waters, perhaps upon pillars. Their movements, subtle or sudden, cause the world to tremble. Continental drift would also be reinterpreted. On a globe, the continents wander slowly, breaking from a single supercontinent and drifting apart. On a flat Earth, the lands might instead spread outward from a central hub, pushed by forces radiating across the plane. Expansion would not mean drifting around a ball, but stretching the fabric of the disk, the outer edges forever widening towards the icy rim. Ancient maps that show continents arranged differently might be read as snapshots of this slow expansion, not error, but memory of shifting plains. Consider volcanic chains like the Andes or the Pacific Ring of Fire. On a globe, they trace the edges of tectonic plates. On a flat Earth, they would mark fault lines in the slab itself, seams where the crust buckles, cracks, and releases heat. Lava flows might be seen as the breath of the underworld, not from a molten core, but from a layer beneath, perhaps a reservoir of fire that stretches across the plane. Each eruption would be a reminder that the disk is not static, but alive, trembling with forces unseen. Even earthquakes take on a different character. In Japan, legends speak of a giant catfish thrashing beneath the land, its movements causing quakes. In a flat world, such imagery might be literalized. The earth does not rotate, does not spin, but it shudders when the supports beneath shift or creatures of myth stir. The tremors that level cities and split mountains would be understood as the breath or motion of what lies beneath, hidden by the slab we walk upon. Modern science instruments, seismographs, drills, radar, would still register vibrations, but their interpretation would be altered. Instead of proving a layered sphere, they would map the echoes of a flat foundation. Seismic waves would be read not as signals through a globe, but as ripples spreading across the plate. The deepest drills, which in our world only scratch a fraction of the Earth's crust, would be said to pierce toward the unknown. Perhaps waters beneath, perhaps the void, perhaps the very pillars that hold the disk aloft. And what of the magnetic field, which on a sphere arises from a molten core? In this world, magnetism might be explained by currents within the slab itself, flowing outward from the central pole. Compasses would still point north, but not because of a spinning dynamo at Earth's heart. Instead, they would align with streams of force woven into the plane. Thus, geology itself becomes a discipline of mystery rather than certainty. Mountains are folds in a stage. Volcanoes are vents from reservoirs beneath. Earthquakes are tremors in the slab. The continents spread outward, not around, their edges forever pushing against the icy wall. The earth is no globe with inner fire. It is a plain with hidden depths, its foundations concealed, its surface trembling under the weight of time. Picture a voyage to the world's very limits, where the oceans stretch outward until they meet the edge. In our familiar globe, every sea leads back upon itself, looping around a sphere. But in a flat earth, the waters must end somewhere. The question becomes not whether there is an edge, but what that edge holds. Is it a sheer abyss where the sea pours into darkness? Is it a frozen barrier, as earlier sections have imagined? Or is it something more strange, a boundary where ocean meets uncharted lands, realms beyond the circle of human maps? Throughout history, sailors and storytellers conjured visions of such edges. Ancient Greek accounts spoke of Oceanus, a river encircling the known world, its waters flowing endlessly at the rim. Norse myths described vast seas that lapped against Jormungandr, the world serpent guarding Midgard's borders. Medieval maps often painted monstrous figures at the margins, krakens, leviathans, beasts with gaping jaws, warning travelers of the dangers beyond. On a flat earth, these warnings would not be metaphor but testimony. They would describe what lay at the outermost seas, where the surface gave way to mystery. Imagine a ship pressing outward, farther than charts allow. At first, waters grow colder, winds sharper. Then, at the horizon, something unfamiliar appears. Perhaps a wall of ice, or a vast cataract where waves thunder into the abyss, never to return. The crew would whisper of the Great Fall, where oceans spill into void. If this were real, history would remember not merely shipwrecks, but vanishings, voyages swallowed by the edges of the disk, their fates forever untold. Some might believe the edges conceal lands unseen, places cut off from the circle we inhabit. Legends of lost continents, Atlantis, Lemuria, High Brazil, would be reinterpreted not as sunken worlds, but as territories lying just beyond the rim, hidden by the icy barrier or the roaring cataract. In this flat world, explorers who disappeared may not have died at sea, but stumbled across these forbidden realms, their silence enforced not by storm, but by secrecy. Even the cycle of the oceans would be reimagined. On a globe, water evaporates, condenses, and returns, locked in balance by curvature and gravity. On a flat plane, tides and currents must still move, but their explanations shift. Some would say they flow inward from the rim, surging like a pulse from the edges. Others would argue they circle outward, draining slowly toward the abyss, replenished by waters that rise again from beneath the slab. The ocean's roar becomes not only natural sound, but the voice of the edge itself, echoing the secret mechanics of the disk. In literature, too, the idea of the sea's end persists. Dante, in his Divine Comedy, imagined an ocean leading to the base of a mountain at the world's farthest point. Medieval romances told of heroes who sailed beyond the known waters, only to find a horizon that could not be crossed. In our world, these are allegories. In a flat world, they are chronicles, stories handed down of journeys that brushed against the perimeter, where water met finality. And yet, the edge would hold terror and awe in equal measure. Children would grow up warned never to dream of sailing too far. Mariners would tell fireside tales of the edge roar, the sound of waves crashing where the sea meets void. Priests and rulers would shape doctrine around the edges, claiming them as divine barriers set by gods to cage humanity. Science itself would circle the mystery, offering theories but never proof, for the rim would resist all attempts at approach. Thus, in the flat Earth vision, the oceans do not wrap the globe but stretch like a great basin, bounded at last by cliffs, walls, or falls. The horizon is not endless invitation, but guarded threshold. The sea, which in our world carries us to every shore, becomes in this story a reminder that limits exist, that beyond a certain point lies only silence, terror, or realms humanity was never meant to see. Belief has always been more than observation. It is shaped by authority, by culture, by the stories we inherit. If the earth were flat, the persistence of that idea across centuries would not appear fringe or rebellious, but central, woven into the fabric of faith and power. History would read differently, a record of how control was exerted through cosmology, and how resistance often took the form of questioning what lay beyond the horizon. In the Middle Ages, the Church guarded the structure of the cosmos as part of its sacred authority. Our history shows debates over geocentrism, with Galileo and Copernicus challenging old models. But in a flat world, the tension would not be over whether Earth or Sun lies at the center. It would be over whether humanity is enclosed or free. To question the dome or the ice wall would be to question divine order itself. Preachers would thunder that the heavens are fixed above the disk by the Creator, and the oceans are locked within the rim for humanity's safety. To doubt such a design would be heresy, a challenge not only to doctrine, but to the very stability of society. Power always clings to certainty. Kings and emperors might invoke the flat world to justify their rule, claiming dominion over lands that radiate from a sacred center. Medieval maps placed Jerusalem at the middle of the disk, a cosmic heart from which all authority flowed. In this flat vision, such positioning becomes not symbolism, but literal geography. The Holy City, as true axis of the world, its placement affirming divine hierarchy. To march armies outward, to claim territories, would be to push against the fringes of creation itself. And yet, dissent would persist. The idea that the earth could be other than authorities claimed, larger, stranger, perhaps even curved, would take on the role of rebellion. To sketch an alternative map would be to undermine power. To suggest hidden lands beyond the wall would be to whisper of forbidden freedoms. Heretics and visionaries would become the keepers of doubt, their punishments harsh, their writings burned, yet their questions surviving in secret circles. The Renaissance, with its spirit of inquiry, would still ignite tensions. In our history, humanists challenged scholasticism with observation and experiment. In the flat world, their defiance would focus on the enclosure itself. Artists painting domes and heavens would slip subtle clues into their work. Stars bending oddly, horizons hinting at vastness. Scientists would risk accusation not for proposing a heliocentric globe, but for suggesting that the boundaries were not as final as priests declared. The struggle between faith and reason would still unfold, but its axis would be the edge of the earth. Even in modern times, the flat earth belief would carry weight as a form of resistance. To declare the world flat in an age of governments, corporations, and satellites would be to accuse power itself of deceit. Movements would rise not only as scientific disputes, but as political gestures, communities reclaiming authority over truth. The dome, the wall, the disk would be symbols of identity, proof that knowledge belongs to the people, not to distant institutions. And so, faith, power, and control would intertwine. The flat earth would be both sacred truth and contested ground. It would justify authority by centering holy cities, by proclaiming enclosure as divine design. It would also inspire rebellion by tempting seekers to look beyond the walls, to doubt what was enforced. The very shape of the earth would become the most important battlefield for human freedom, fought not with weapons, but with maps, sermons, and whispers. In this imagined history, the persistence of flat earth belief is not eccentricity. It is the story of how humans wrestle with control, how faith binds and liberates, how power frames the cosmos to secure its throne. The Earth's shape is not just a question of science, it is a mirror of who commands truth. If the Earth were flat, then all of human culture, its sciences, its stories, its symbols, would have grown in different soil. Imagine a civilization that never dreamed of a globe, never spoke of orbits, never saw itself as suspended in infinite space. Instead, it would know only the great plain beneath, the dome above, and the edges that guard its horizon. Its philosophies would not wrestle with vastness, but with boundaries. Its science would not reach outward into the cosmos, but inward across the disk, measuring distances that radiate from the center. Education in such a world would teach children that the sky is close, protective, and intentional. The sun would be explained as a lantern whose warmth is gifted daily, the moon as a counterbalancing light, the stars as eternal runes inscribed for guidance. Astronomy would be less about predicting orbits and more about understanding cycles of the dome's machinery. The word universe would mean not infinity, but enclosure, a single chamber where all existence unfolds. For many, this would not feel limiting. It would feel comforting, as though the world were a house with a roof, a space made for humanity. Navigation, too, would evolve differently. Sailors would not speak of global seas, but of concentric journeys, circles traced outward from the hub of the north. Trade would flow like ripples, not lines wrapping a sphere, but bands radiating across the disk. The fear of the edge would restrain, but also inspire. Some would whisper of forbidden voyages, secret maps leading to lands hidden behind the wall. Tales of Atlantis, of golden cities, of uncharted continents would be not dreams of the deep ocean, but rumors of what lies just beyond the boundary. Even religion would carry different tones. In our history, the vastness of space humbled humanity, suggesting insignificance. In a flat world, enclosure confirms intimacy. The dome becomes evidence of a universe tailored, designed, bounded for human life. Temples would rise not toward unreachable stars, but toward the ceiling of heaven, ornamented as though the gods resided just above. Prayer would feel like calling across a room, not whispering into void. The spiritual would be nearer, the sacred sky a canopy alive with intention. Philosophy, too, would bend along these lines. Thinkers would ponder not the infinity of space, but the mystery of containment. If there is a wall, who built it? If the dome arches above, who maintains its turning? Questions of meaning would circle not around infinite regress, but around craftsmanship, design, and purpose. The cosmos itself would appear as artifact, its shape demanding interpretation. Existence would feel curated, the flat earth like a stage built for a story. Technology might follow slower paths. Without a globe to challenge imagination, there would be less reason to build ships to cross oceans, rockets to pierce skies. Yet innovation would not die. It would take new forms. Scholars might build grand instruments to measure the dome's cycles. Engineers might carve tunnels into the plain, seeking the waters or fires beneath. Medicine, art, architecture, all would grow, but always within the frame of a world that is flat, enclosed, and deliberate. And yet, human restlessness would persist. Even in this alternate reality, there would be dreamers who refused to accept limits. Painters would sketch the dome breaking open, revealing other realms. Poets would write of travelers who climbed the ice wall and walked into a greater sky. Children would press their faces to the horizon and ask what lies beyond the line. Curiosity, like a tide, would never stop flowing, even against the walls of the world. Thus emerges the image of parallel realities. In one, humanity grows beneath a globe, reaching for stars, imagining infinity. In the other, it grows upon a disk, living within enclosure, imagining what lies beyond the barrier. Both paths produce wonder. Both paths inspire fear. The shape of the earth changes the shape of the human soul, bending dreams in one direction or another. And if the flat earth were true, then our civilizations would be gardens beneath a roof, tended by the nearness of heaven, haunted by the mystery of edges we cannot cross. The story drifts now toward its quiet end. We have walked across a world imagined as flat, tracing horizons that do not bend, skies that circle overhead like a lantern show, seas that press against walls of ice. We have followed shadows that whisper of a nearby sun, ships that vanish not below a curve, but into haze, maps that conceal more than they reveal. Each step has carried us further into a place where the familiar rules soften, where science turns into story, and where myth and memory are not mistakes, but reflections of truth. If the earth were flat, life itself would feel nearer, enclosed, protective. The heavens would lean close, the stars hanging like beads on a ceiling, the sun sweeping in tight arcs that warm and cool the plain. Oceans would no longer promise infinity, but remind us of the boundaries of our home, and mountains would rise not from a sphere's restless crust, but as folds in a great slab. To dwell here would mean to believe the cosmos itself was crafted for us, its edges set with intention, its limits chosen for care, and yet even in this enclosed world, questions would remain. What lies beyond the wall? What hand set the dome spinning? What powers stir the slab beneath our feet? Humanity would still gaze upward, still wonder, still weave tales of what cannot be seen. Perhaps that is the enduring truth, that no matter the shape of the earth, curiosity persists, a flame that flickers but never dies. So let the mind rest now. Picture the horizon stretching, flat and silver, merging with the dark. Picture the dome above, stars twinkling softly, lanterns gliding in their timeless circles. Feel the hush of the ocean as it meets the rim, steady and eternal. Let the world slow, let thoughts soften, let mystery cradle you like the sky itself. The earth may be globe or disk, sphere or plane, but tonight it is simply home, steady beneath your body, quiet beneath your breath. And as the dome darkens, as the lanterns dim, may your eyes grow heavy, your mind untroubled, your heart eased by wonder. The journey pauses here, the story fading into silence. Good night.